Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us today. My name is Dick Orlando. I'm COO and President at LeveragePoint, and I'd like to welcome all of you to another one of our monthly webinars on value-based strategies for pricing, product management, marketing, and sales. LeveragePoint provides the only software solution for value-based pricing. Our customers successfully implement a cloud-based collaboration platform that enables the process from product innovation, product management, pricing, all the way through communicating value propositions to their customers via their sales force. Please note that during the webinar presentation, you're welcome to ask questions at any time by typing them into the right-hand panel within the questions section. And at the conclusion of our presentation, we will answer as many questions as possible and provide answers to any unanswered questions directly. Also, please complete the brief 3-question online survey so we can serve you better in the future as you exit the webinar, and be eligible for the drawing of a super book. It's very popular, called Value-Based Pricing, written by today's presenter, Mike Wilkinson. So please be kind enough to provide your feedback at the end and hopefully win Mike's book. This webinar was really interesting for us. We sent out this invitation, and before introducing Mike, I'd like to share with you that this webcast invitation resulted in the most one day of registrations ever at LeveragePoint. And I'd like to think it was LeveragePoint or Mike's picture, but for some reason I think it was the Warren Buffett and Forrester research messages at the top of the invitation. So why did this have such a large impact on our audience, I was wondering. So I called a few of you and asked you what you thought about this. And it really was that gap that exists today between what's going on between the internal folks who really subscribe to the Warren Buffett message is price is what you pay, value is what you get. And the internal folks spend an awful lot of time constructing the messages and the pricing to be delivered by the field. Yet Forrester now talks to the customers at these large B2B organizations, and only 19% of the sales meetings that the executives take actually live up to their expectations. So what's happening between the home office with the great work that they're doing and the field people who are delivering the message to the customer? And that's why I'm really pleased today to have the perfect speaker to address this, as Mike has lived it. I'm very excited and pleased to introduce Mike Wilkinson, co-founder of Axia Value Solutions, as our featured presenter today. Mike has over 25 years of worldwide training and consultancy experience and was a 2013 Training Journal Award winner for the top sales training program. Mike is co-author of 2 very popular books in the industry, The Challenge of Value and Value-Based Pricing, and has written many articles on managing major account sales and value-based selling. He is a fellow of the Institute of Sales and Marketing Management and a member of the Professional Speakers Association and the Global Speakers Federation. Mike, welcome, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, well, Dick, thank you very much indeed for that incredibly kind introduction. And I'm really delighted that so many people have actually subscribed to today's talk. And it does just go to show the real interest between this relationship between the people in pricing and the folk out in the field doing the selling in the sales teams. And I will certainly be touching on that. The one thing you failed to mention is that I am actually a salesperson myself. And when I look through the list of today's attendees, it suggests that whilst we have some salespeople around, there are quite a lot of pricing people here. And I'm always a little bit nervous, like many salespeople. I'm a bit nervous in front of salespeople. In fact, I'm always nervous when I look at sort of job titles like Global Pricing Director and Strategic Pricing Managers and Intergalactic Pricing and Value Analysts and the like. But having said that, I often think that in the presence of sales guys, those prices amongst you should be nervous too. Because if I may, to borrow something of an Americanism, I'm where the pricing rubber meets the customer road. Your prices go nowhere without me and people like me. So when you spent your hours with your spreadsheets and sophisticated software systems coming up with detailed calculations to arrive at the most appropriate cost-based, competition-based, or value-based price, it's me and people like me who are the ones that take that price out to the customer, and all too often discount it. Now, I realize that might sound a little bit flippant, but I suspect that certainly those of you who are pricing people in the audience will occasionally think that if only salespeople did as they were told and stopped arguing about price, then we'd be able to achieve our targeted prices much more easily. But the problem that they have, and many pricing guys don't have, is that they have to meet the customer. And as a sales guy told me only a few months ago, this is a quote which I rather liked, pricing's like planning a battle in the comfort of battalion headquarters, but not having to actually go out and do the pricing personally. Oh, and not providing me with the weapons I need for the fight either, or at least not explaining to me how I should use them. Now, I'll come back to some of those thoughts a bit later on, but to plan the battle effectively, you do need intelligence from the front line. And this is where the sales role as a key communication focus starts to become critical. The sales folks are the hub, if you like, the link for information, first of all, coming into the business. And it's the kind of information that helps us to really understand the customer and their value drivers, the things that are important to them, the issues they face, the opportunities they're seeking to address. And having this information should help us to develop a really differentiated solution for the salesperson to take back out to the customer, to present, to sell, and achieve our sophisticatedly calculated value-based price. Only all too often they don't. And the question is, why not? And I think there are many answers, but two answers are value and dolphins. Now, I'll come back to dolphins a little bit later on, and in fact, I'll come back to value a little bit later on. What I first want to do is just think about price management and this concept of price management, because when I think about price and pricing, I think about these two key components. The first bit is, if you like, the price setting component, which is where many of you probably come in, those of you in the pricing game. And then on the other side, there is the price getting component, which is where the sales team generally come in. All too frequently, these seem to be disconnected activities. And I appreciate that in many businesses, finance, marketing, R&D, and others are also actively involved in the process. But my real interest is in making sure that the sales team is properly equipped to do the price-getting job. Now, I did mention a little bit earlier on that there is value is part of the answer to the problem, and this whole question of value just begins to make things a little bit more difficult, because all too frequently in the work that we're doing, we are finding that salespeople have surprisingly little real depth of understanding about what value is outside of features and benefits, and then little skill or support in monetizing and presenting their value to the customer more effectively. So what are the challenges of value? And over the years, we've developed 7, which we think are critically important, what we call the 7 challenges of value. And the first challenge is in understanding just what value is. And this as a challenge came to me about probably 6 or 7 years ago, maybe more now, and I was speaking to a group of chemical salespeople, some fairly serious top-line chemical salespeople in Copenhagen, and they'd very kindly invited me for dinner the night before. And during the course of dinner, I was just amazed at how many times I was told that the one thing they delivered to their customers was great value. In fact, I was told they delivered great value to their customers so often often during the evening that I thought, I've got to do something about this. I have to understand what on earth it is they're talking about. So in the morning, on my session, I decided to do something different to what I had planned. And I said to them, guys, last night, I was amazed at how many of you told me that you deliver great value to your customers. So what I would like you to do is, I'd like you to tell me what value is. And I gave them a simple exercise. I said, all I want you to do is to come up for me with a definition of value. And your definition should start value is, and I want to know what it is. So value is what? And there were probably about 120 people in the audience sat around tables. So I probably had about 10 or 12 definitions. And each of the tables, their task was to write the definition on a card and give me the cards back. Well, right at the outset, it was obvious that this was perhaps a bigger challenge than I'd imagined, because there was lots of head scratching, lots of sort of confused whispering amongst the table groups. And when I got the 12 definitions back, it was fairly clear by the end of the process that, you know, it was as confusing as they'd imagined. Every definition was different, not massively so, and there were some similarities, but there was a lot of difference between the 12 definitions. And they kind of guessed that if they didn't know and couldn't articulate what value was amongst themselves, communicating value to their customers was going to be that bit more difficult. Now, we did actually finally come up with what we considered to be the perfect definition of value. At the time, I didn't see it that way, but over time, it's very much become our definition of value. And certainly in the book, The Challenge of Value, this is the definition that we focus on. And it was only 4 words. And when I looked at this card, I thought, well, I can't say that. But I did, and as I say, over time it has become our definition. And the words were, value is a mystery. And the reality is, the more that I thought about that, the more I began to appreciate that that is actually exactly what value is. We do not define value, our customers define value, and our job as a business and as a sales team is to solve the value mystery. And there are 2 elements to that, if you think about it. One is, what is value? What are the component elements of value? What does value look like? And I will take a look at that in a few minutes' time. But the other is, what does value look like from our customer's point of view? Because it really doesn't matter how much time we spend in darkened rooms thinking about what we think value is. What really matters is, how do our customers see it, and do they see it in the same way that we do? I will touch on that a little bit later on in a bit more detail. So that was our first challenge, understanding just what value is. The second challenge is that once we've found out what value is, we have to recognize that people's value and value perceptions are constantly changing. So just because I have talked to a customer today about what is important to them in terms of value, that does not mean the same things will be important in 4 weeks' time, 2 months' time, half a year's time, or whatever it might be. People's perceptions are in a constant state of flux, depending upon their financial situation, the market situation, problems that they have, opportunities that they have, and all the rest of it. And it is important to recognize that that is the case. One big challenge we find is salespeople actually identifying people who care about value. And we can certainly start by saying that you cannot sell value to people who do not care about value. So you have to find those customers and those people within your customers who appreciate the value that you can deliver. I'm frequently asked, when we're approaching a business for the first time, who should we talk to? And I guess the traditional answer is you should aim as high in the organization as you can, because it's much easier to go down than it is necessarily to go up. But my answer increasingly now is that you should aim to talk to the people in the customer's business who will benefit the most from the value that you deliver, because they will then become potentially your evangelists within the business. If they can really see and appreciate and understand that you can deliver real value benefits to the business, then they'll be more than happy to talk about what you can do to their colleagues. Once we've identified the people who care about the value we can deliver, we then need to differentiate in ways that matter. I will return your thinking to challenge number 1, understanding just what value is. If you have failed to solve the value mystery and understood what value means to the customer, you will not be able to differentiate your solution to that customer. Differentiation comes from 2 things, really. 1 is understanding what's important to the customer, and 2 is understanding what your competitors are doing, because that is who we could differentiate against. And one key point about differentiation is that being different is not necessarily differentiation. Differentiation is being different in ways that your customer values, and that's really important. So now that we've got to a point of differentiation, we then need to communicate that value and communicate that differentiation effectively to the customer. And this is really, I guess, the answer to the all-important question, why should we choose you rather than a competitor? So my question to you is, do you have a value proposition? Does everybody know what it is? Does everybody understand it? And do they have the ability to take your overall value proposition and tailor it and communicate it effectively and persuasively to the people who matter, the people who are going to make the decisions and influence the decisions on the sale? And one sales VP I was working with wanted to feel really confident that his salespeople were communicating his company's value proposition effectively, and I agreed with him. I said, yeah, I think that is actually really, really important. So what is your value proposition? And there wasn't one. So he wanted his salespeople to effectively communicate a value proposition that didn't exist. So our starting point was to make one exist and develop one for him. Stage 6 is you then have to capture your value through price. There's really not a lot of point in going through 1 to 5 if you don't then share in some of the value that you deliver. Value pricing is not about overcharging. Value pricing is about negotiating an equitable share of the additional value that you can deliver over and above alternative solutions. So our ability to capture that value, our ability to negotiate effectively around that value starts to become really important. Now, if you look at challenges 1 to 6, if you like, they are our value promise. Those are the things that we say to our customer we can do. Challenge 7 is then you have to deliver. You have to deliver the value that you've promised. And I think for 2 reasons. First of all, it's all about credibility. And the more frequently we can do the things that we say we're going to do, the greater our credibility and our trust becomes. But it also helps us to establish great case studies. And one of the things that I think is really important is that we agree with the customer what value measures are going to be in place, that we measure them so that if we're falling short, we've got an opportunity to do something about it. If we're achieving the value we promised, that we've got a case study in the offing that's going to become useful to us as we try to sell our value elsewhere. And now, I mentioned earlier that value is a mystery, but actually if you think about it, that doesn't help an awful lot, because if I say to a sales guy, look folks, value is a mystery, get out there and solve it, that's not really as helpful as you might imagine. To really begin to understand value from a customer's perspective, we need a more practical understanding of the component elements of value. And for that, we developed the Value Triad. Now, when we were putting this together, we thought of all sorts of ways of trying to capture an understanding of value, and this seemed to us to be the most simple and easy way of doing it. And I don't think it's going to come as a great surprise to anybody. A value triad is a triangle, and the first element of it is revenue gain or performance gain, if you like. And really that is the answer to the question, how does your solution help your customers improve their revenue or improve their overall performance? That's question 1. Question 2 is around cost reduction. And that is very much, how does your solution help your customer to reduce their costs? Now, Both of those components, if you like, are absolutes. They are objective. I'm not going to say necessarily it's easy, but they are measurable. We should be able to monetize the value of our revenue addition and the value of our cost reduction capabilities for the customer. And most customers, if I say to a customer, we're going to help you to improve your revenue, their question is, brilliant, how much and by when? So this ability to monetize our solutions starts to become really, really important. And I'm sure Dick will come onto that when he talks about the LeveragePoint solution. The third element of the value triad we did play around with and think about quite a long time before we finally determined upon what we have called emotional contribution. And this is really critically important. It may be the slightly less objective element, but it is frequently forgotten, but it is vitally important. It's about generating customer trust and confidence. It's about the value of the brand. It's about risk reduction, about making it easy to do business with you. It's all those sort of slightly less finite things that make the difference. And in a world of increasing commoditization, we're told, sometimes this emotional contribution can be the big differentiator. And there's lots of stuff around the importance of customer relationships and all of those things, and that's what falls within the remit of emotional contribution. As I said, cost reduction and revenue gain, very much absolute, very much objective. Emotional contribution, much more perceived, much more subjective. Certainly much more difficult to put a monetized value around, but no less important because of that. And when you add those three things together, it's then you get the total value to the customer. And clearly in any one sale, the relative sizes of each of those triangles will vary. For some customers, revenue gain will be the most important element of your sales argument. In others, cost reduction will be. And so you will play around with those, and in solving the value mystery in conversation with your customers, begin to understand what is really critically important. So, as I say, every business-to-business purchase has a mix of all of those things together. We use loads of tools to sort of help support understanding of their simple value triad analyses, so what analyses, which helps us to then build a more monetized value against each of the component elements of your solution. But the real key is that it all has to be done from the customer's point of view. After all, it is the customer who ultimately defines value, not us. Now, that does not mean we shouldn't have a very, very good idea of what is going to be valuable to each customer, and certainly that's one of the reasons why we segment customers into defined segments, so that we can actually communicate our value more easily. But the real question is, how do we find out? And it is important that we understand value from each individual customer's point of view. Now, we can do it in a variety of ways, and I'm sure your businesses will undertake market research, but for most businesses, the logical way to do so is through the people who are in constant touch with your customers, and that generally means the sales team. So, over to the sales team. And I'm not necessarily saying that your sales team looks as professional and sophisticated as these three guys, but I think the natural key characteristic that is essential for any sales team is what I call a real natural curiosity, a real and genuine desire to want to find things out. And the key skills clearly are questioning and listening. Any sales program will focus on those. But as a colleague once said to me, great salespeople ask great questions, period. There's no shortcut. Now, I mentioned earlier on that many of the salespeople we come across have to be honest, a fairly rudimentary understanding of value. And as a result of that, all too often, the means for winning business is not a demonstration of the value, but the application of what I call the discount default. And this is where my dolphins come in. It's a bit too expensive, but I'm sure we can discount the price a little. discount button, default button, press gently to deliver unnecessary discount. Now, so dolphins, where on earth do dolphins come in? And the answer to the question is that many salespeople have trained their buyers to behave in the same way that a dolphin trainer will train a dolphin to behave. So I would suggest, my hypothesis is that salespeople would make fantastic dolphin trainers. Let me try and explain what I mean by that. Now, looking at the number of people on the call, and we seem to have quite a lot of them, I'm just wondering if anybody actually has a dolphin, because if you have a dolphin, obviously this explanation will become much more real for you. If you haven't got a dolphin, just imagine that you would like one. Because there are a number of things you need to do your dolphin training. First of all, clearly you need a dolphin. Then you're going to need a pretty big pond to put the dolphin in. And for your dolphin training, you're going to need a rope and a big bucket of fish. And what you're going to do to start the process is you lay the rope across the bottom of the pond. And every time the dolphin swims over the rope, you will give it a fish. And the dolphin, being quite an intelligent sort of a chap, will quickly latch onto this and will quickly recognize that fishes can be fairly easily come by if I only keep exhibiting an acceptable kind of behavior, i.e. swimming over the rope. And you'll slowly then begin to move the rope off the bottom of the pond, and every time the dolphin swims over the rope, it gets a fish. Every time it swims under the rope, it gets nothing, until finally the rope is on the surface of the pond. And if the dolphin swims under it, it gets nothing, and if the dolphin jumps out of the pond, it will get a fish. Now, that is the way that salespeople have trained buyers. All you need to do is to substitute the word dolphin for buyer, and substitute the rope for anything the customer says to you which says you're too expensive, or I'd want money off, or whatever it is, and substitute the bucket of fish for discounts. And that's precisely how salespeople train buyers. If you ask for a discount, I will give you one. Now, I don't particularly work with procurement, but I make it my business to stay close to procurement people. And every procurement person I have spoken to tells me that at some point in the conversation that they have with salespeople, they will always tell the seller in one way or another that they are too expensive. And the reason they say that is that they tell me because in 95% of cases, if I tell a salesman we're too expensive, the first thing I get is a discount. And that is what we need to try to begin to address. And that's really where dolphin training comes into its own. So I hope those of you who want dolphins are now feeling much better informed than perhaps you were. Now, this sort of brings us to what I call the 5 C's of value. 5 things that we need to do in order to begin to think about how we deliver great value to our customers. The first is we have to understand the things the customer values. Here is a way that as a salesperson, as an organization, you can begin the differentiation process. I believe there is a real competitive advantage to be gained in having a salesman or a sales team that understands its customers' needs better than its competitors do. Once you've understood the things the customers value and solve that value mystery, we've then got to create value for the customer. So understanding what the customer needs, our next job is to define and design a differentiated offering that addresses the customer's requirements more effectively than competitive solutions can. We then got to communicate that value. In other words, we need to put together powerful, persuasive value propositions that clearly communicate our value to the customer. And then we need to convince the customer that our value is worth paying for. So we need to be confident. The 1 C that's not here, which is hugely important, is just having the confidence to sit in front of a customer, and when the customer says, how much is it, to look them in the eye and to tell them. And when they say, goodness, that is jolly expensive, I'd like a discount, to look them in the eye and say, well, look, when you think about the value that we deliver, I would actually go as far as to say, not only aren't we expensive, we're probably not charging quite enough. But that takes serious confidence. The final bit is then clearly we need to capture our value through having an effective price. So why don't customers buy? Frequently, the reason they don't buy is because they do not understand or appreciate the value that we can deliver to them. And I go back to challenge number one. If we understand value, and if we understand what value means to the customer and what they are trying to achieve, then it should be much easier for us to think about ways in which we can differentiate and communicate our value to the customer and persuade them that our value is worth paying for. Someone's got to talk to the customer. The slide that I started off with, really. And I think that if that is the case, and it is, and I'm one of those people, I want people to make sure that the sales guys have the skills, the confidence, and the capability to do that talking well, and to give them the training and the weapons that they need to have those value conversations with customers. So, what do we do next? Well, first of all, I guess, recognize the need to get started. Sales and pricing do need to work more closely together to understand value from the customer's perspective and to then price and communicate that value more effectively. And I just like this quote from Will Rogers. I won't read it out to you. I'm sure you can see it for yourselves. So I'm going to leave you, if you like, with some questions of my own. I know that you probably have questions of yours, but I'd like to ask you 3 or 4. First of all, what are the main takeaways for you from our session today? And perhaps the 2 critical ones are, how can you ensure your sales team supports your pricing initiatives, for those of you who are in pricing? For those of you who are in sales, how can you make sure your pricing team supports you? What do you want from the pricing team that will help you to communicate the price more effectively? So in broad terms, what are you going to do? So that's it. Thank you very much indeed. And I'm going to hand back to Dick now.
That was an excellent presentation, Mike. We really appreciate your practical insights that you've shared with the audience today. Now I know why that it took me about 2 months to track Mike down, and he seems to be in a different country every time I try to find him. And after listening to your presentation, now I know why the demand is so high worldwide for your services, Mike. So thank you again.
No, thank you, Dick. That's very kind.
Now, we have many questions that came in during the webinar. However, there's still time for you to put in your questions on the list by simply going to the questions panel. But first, I want to build on Mike's points about pricing analysis and briefly share the process how our customers use LeveragePoint to capture their product's pricing value via the sales reps' conversations with customers. And emphasis on the word conversation. If you think of a sales cycle, especially in large B2B products, where the sales cycles are long, there are many conversations. Yet the conversations take a very small portion of the entire sales process, as you know. And for any of those who were wondering what the answer was to why Forrester said only 19% of the meetings with B2B executives were worthwhile and 80% were not, the answer was that the reps spoke mostly about their company, their products, their services, not about the customer's problems, issues, and how they can help the business. And Mike did a fabulous job at bringing that point out. In Mike's presentation, when I was reviewing it, this slide really jumped out at me. And Mike did a terrific job at saying 1 to 4 and maybe even 1 to 5. Where really a lot of the work that's done internally prior to the sales rep being able to deliver a message to the customer during that conversation, or going into the conversation with a tremendous amount of confidence, as Mike brought out. Points 5 and 6 is really where it happens. It's where the hard work that the pricing folks have done on pricing the products based on a value-based pricing model want that sales rep to deliver the right message or the right value on their price. And working with product marketing, they've hopefully done that. But now it comes time for the sales reps to do it. So how do our successful B2B customers communicate and capture the value via the sales force? Well, in today's world, if you listen to Mark Benioff of Salesforce and many others, the world right now is it's mobile, cloud, and collaboration driven. That's what the world is all about today. Our customers are changing, and we certainly have to change our sales force. So the sales force needs to be cloud. You need to have a cloud-enabling sales force. And by that I mean all that hard work that's being done by your home office of building these value propositions and by pricing it appropriately and by putting the communication messages in, needs to be provided to the field in a very efficient manner. Because the field has to engage the customers in these value conversations, and Mike has used the word tool and value proposition several times during his pitch, but at that moment of truth, the sales rep is in front of the customer, they're in one of these meetings that Forrester refers to. How do they get that 19% up to 80%? Well, it's by delivering the messages that you want them to deliver that shares the value and the value proposition that deals with the customer's issues, not your issues. And it's sent in a developed in a consistent messaging manner to build that relationship in that business conversation that captures value and obviously wins more deals. But technology is so awesome these days with the cloud, and everybody from Microsoft to Adobe to everybody's moving to the cloud as fast as they can, because it provides the field people a method where 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, that they can access winning propositions that other sales reps around the world have done and modify them for their specific customer in a repository that's broken out by competitors, by industry, by products, etc. And second reason is that they can share the experiences they've faced presenting the products with the pricing people, with the product marketing people back in home office. And I just attended a webinar where between 30 and 40% of a sales rep's time on a particular sales call is spent in research, preparation prior to going into the call. And with this, by sharing successes and sharing information, that time is cut back considerably. Mike, it's now time to take a look at the questions.
Yeah.
And by the way, we will be sharing the slides from today's webinar with all attendees. Wow, Mike, we have a lot of questions. So are you ready to start?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. Number one, it's a tough one. Given your view that salespeople don't understand or don't feel confident talking about value, and as a result they fall into the discount default trap, what steps can we take to avoid that?
Yeah, well, thanks for an easy one to start with, Dick. That's well, actually, I think perhaps part of the answer is in the question, which is, given my view that many salespeople don't understand value, and I think the way we begin to answer that discount default trap is by helping salespeople to understand value, and perhaps more importantly, have the confidence to talk about value with the customer. So when they're doing their sort of discovery phase of the sales process, they need to be exploring the things that are valuable, the things that are important to the customer, the key issues that they're facing. So and actually what I find in the work that I'm doing with organizations all over the world is that trying to get the organization in totality to understand value. So this is not just a sales force requirement. It's not just the salespeople who need to understand what value is. The organization needs to have a sort of an accepted view of what value means in totality.
That's great. Yeah, you know, we did a survey of our customers, and that confidence jumped to the top. The sales reps came back and said, the more confident that we are that we are going into a sales call, that the information we have is accurate, it's correct, and other customers have also fed that back. It makes them better salespeople, and the calls go better.
Yeah, absolutely right. Yeah.
Second question, how can pricing provide the support that sales needs to help them make better decisions and realize better margins?
Well, I think that's probably as difficult as the first one. I think perhaps it starts off with the sort of slightly jaundiced view that salespeople have of pricing being the new sales prevention department. Constantly wanting the sales team to get higher prices and nothing else. I think it comes back to communication. I think it comes back to both sales and pricing appreciating the challenges that each of them face, but also recognizing with this joint appreciation of what value is and a joint appreciation of what the value to their business is of getting improved prices and improved margins. I think it's about a combination of all of those things. But I do think it is about sales seeing pricing as part of their resource rather than seeing pricing as something that gets in the way of their ability to discount at will and sort of come up with prices out of the hat.
That's great. And I had a conversation with a CFO of one of our customers recently, and I've experienced this at some of our other customers as well, that they say, look, we're not asking the salespeople not to discount. That's unrealistic. Some procurement folks, for whatever reasons, they just won't agree on anything unless they get a discount. However, what we've seen using tools like LeveragePoint is the reduction of the discount over the course of a year of anywhere from 1% to 2% is huge to our bottom line. So if a sales rep can gear that conversation more to value and make it part of the value conversation, especially with the end user before they go into procurement, if they can give an average, if they've been giving an average of 10% discount, if they can shave that to 8% discount, that 2% falls right to the bottom line of a company. Mike, have you experienced that as well?
All the time, Dick, and I completely agree with the point you make. I mean, I never ever say to somebody that the objective of this is to say you're never going to give a discount again. That is naive in the extreme. What I'm trying to do is to get people away from discount as the default mechanism and replace it with value as the default. So when a customer says you're too expensive, instead of instantly going to discount, the first thing we do is to restate the value that we deliver and recognize that, yes, there may well be a need ultimately to offer some small discount, but that shouldn't be the very first thing that we aim to do.
Great, thank you. These questions aren't getting any easier, Mike.
Good.
Mike, based on your experience, what steps can we take? What steps have you seen work where sales and pricing work more closely together?
Well, that's actually an interesting one. I was at a conference in Amsterdam last week, a pricing excellence conference, and precisely the same kind of question came up there. And I think different organizations have different solutions to that problem. We're seeing increasingly the development of pricing councils, where you have representatives from various stakeholders within the organization as part of, if you like, the pricing committee. And that seems to be working pretty well for many businesses, provided it doesn't become, too much of a price designed by committee. It's just so that people can understand and share that understanding of where the pricing is coming from. So I think pricing councils are a key starting point. But again, I then go back to this thing about education, attitudes, culture, just making sure, particularly within the sales area, that they really understand the impact on the business of pricing decisions that they may well take. So when they do decide that they're going to shave 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, however many % it is off the price, do they actually really appreciate the impact on bottom line profitability that is having? So I think that education is really important, as is just a much more broader base of communication across the business.
Okay, I have a question. This is interesting. I just found the question that I like the word. You said you were frightened of pricing earlier.
Yeah. You
and salespeople are frightened. In all the webcasters, I've never heard be so direct.
Yeah, well,
how can we, the pricing people, make you less frightened, Mike, the salesperson?
Well, I just think that I'm not me. I'm not frightened of pricing people, but I think a lot of salespeople think of pricing as something of a black art, conducted by strange people in darkened basement rooms with multiple screens, all sat there wearing milk bottle-bottomed glasses. So there's this perception of pricing as being strange folk, and as I mentioned before, also the fact that pricing is the new sales prevention department. It used to be credit control, now it's the pricing team. And I think, again, I mean, it's a kind of flippant comment, but I guess we need to make sure that sales do understand, as I said before, the implications of what they do when they come to discount, but also they need to understand why pricing is coming up with the prices that it comes up with, where those prices come from, what the benefits to the organization and the individual are if they can attain those prices. So yeah, I think maybe that's it. And again, it's about confidence. It's not about being frightened. People are frightened of the unknown. And I think when people don't understand and don't appreciate what the role of pricing is, that's part of the source of this sort of lack of confidence in dealing with it.
Well, that's great. Well, thank you very much. We want to keep to roughly our 45-minute time limit, but with all the questions, we could go on for another hour, Mike. But we'll make sure we provide answers to those questions directly. I want to make sure that you all have an opportunity to win in the raffle for Mike's book, Value-Based Pricing. So please it literally will take you 15, 20 seconds to fill out three webcast questions, which will help us deliver better webinars in the future. And that's all the time we have for today. However, our next webinar will be in June. It'll be given by our Vice President of Product and a founder of the company, Ed Arnold, and he'll be speaking about one of the chapters in a recently published book called The ROI of Pricing that many of you may have seen at PPS and other places. And it's called The Agile Deployment of Value-Based Strategy. We'll be getting something out to you soon for that June 24th session. Thank you very much, Mike. I really appreciate it. And most important, thank you very much of all the attendees. And we look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you very much indeed, Dick, and thanks to everyone.